Hello everyone, welcome to the second workshop. This is teacher recommendations and interviews. My name is Grace Chen, and as a disclaimer before we begin, we will be recording this workshop for reference for anyone who was unable to join us today or for anyone who wants to rewatch the video later in the year. So if you want to turn off your camera, if you don't feel comfortable, feel free to. Also, I will be spotlighted throughout the workshop, so I think only my face will show. But yeah, once again, we're going to get started. And my name is Grace Chen. I'm from the Bay Area of California, and I will be attending Cornell University in the fall, studying policy analysis and management. And I will be covering teacher recs. I have a friend here named Ryan Fung. He's going to Brown University this fall, and he'll be covering interviews. And unfortunately, he is unable to join us today, but we do have a video of his presentation that we will share later on. So once again, I'm covering teacher recommendations, and I think they're a pretty important aspect of the application process because it's showing an admissions officer how others perceive you, and it helps in general develop you as a person and a character on paper. So for most of the seniors who are currently in the application process right now, I'm pretty sure you guys are either picking your schools or finalizing your school list, but once you do have that list settled, you want to research these schools and see what type of recommendations or they require or any other guidelines they have. So for example, some schools require that you only ask teachers from your junior and senior year. Some require you to have at least one teacher or all your teachers be related to your major. And of course, each school has a certain number of recs that they do require. So if we look to the right here, this school required 2 teacher recommendations and had 1 optional one, and then they had 3 optional other recommenders. So the difference between a teacher recommender and the other recommender is, as in the name, the teacher recommender is a teacher from your school. The other recommender can basically be anybody else. So that can be a coach, a pastor, someone from an extracurricular, an employer. It's really up to you. And most of the time, the other recommenders are completely optional. So keeping these requirements in mind, it's now time to pick your teachers. And I have 6 pieces of advice for when it comes to picking teachers. The first being you want to pick a teacher that knows you well and not just a teacher's class which you did well in, because you want the teacher to write about you as a person and not just you as a letter grade or a generic hardworking student. You want the teacher to be able to cover really personal aspects of you and to share very personal anecdotes about you to add a lot of content into your letter. My second piece of advice is to pick a teacher, at least one teacher related to your major, because they can talk about how well you perform in that certain subject. So for me, I'm majoring in public policy. So I asked my competitive civics teacher to write me a letter recommendation because she was able to talk about my interest in government and kind of the research I had done on policy. My third piece of advice is you don't want to restrict yourself to teachers that are related to your major. So if you're majoring in biology, you don't just want to ask STEM teachers. You can branch out and ask an English teacher or history teacher because it can show an admissions reader how well-rounded of a student you are and that you're able to persevere in any subject. My fourth piece of advice is to pick a teacher that you've had for multiple years. So not every student is able to have a teacher for multiple years, but for me, I took orchestra all 4 years of high school and I had the same teacher for all 4 years. So I asked him to write a letter of rec because he was able to talk about my growth and development as a student from my wee little days in freshman year all the way to my senior year right before my college application process. So he's able to see how I had grown as a student and how I had improved. My fifth piece of advice is to consider teacher advisors from clubs. These teachers are able to write about you in a context outside of just academics because they've seen you as a leader, they've seen you organize meetings, they've seen you work collaboratively with other students, so they can write about different things, different traits other than just academics. My sixth and final piece of advice is to only add other recommenders if you know that they will add something new. Admissions readers often say that you shouldn't add option or you shouldn't write or add extra recs if they're just going to repeat what your teachers have already said. So this is a good opportunity to look for people to write recs that are outside of the academic context. So this can be an employer, a coach, a pastor, because you want them to write about other personality traits that your teachers haven't already covered. So make sure to keep that in mind. So that's my 6 pieces of advice. And now that hopefully you have somewhat of an idea of what teachers you want to ask, it comes to now how to ask them and when to ask them. So it's really, really important to ask them as soon as possible. And you don't want to ask a few days before the deadline because it's stressful for you, it's stressful for the teacher, and it's not very healthy. So if you're a senior currently that is applying, you want to ask over email right now if you haven't, or right when this conference ends. Even though it's summer and even though it's just an email notification, it's good to let the teacher know as soon as possible so that they can prepare. The email can sound something like, "Hello, Ms. Smith, I really enjoyed your class in my blank year. I plan on asking you for a letter rec my senior year, just wanted to let you know ahead of time." This allows the teacher to prep any materials or just to think about the letter over the summer. And then when August hits or when the school year hits, they can actually start writing it. You might want to ask them again in person when the school year actually starts, and then submit that request on the Common Application portal or whatever other portal you may be using. For non-seniors, I recommend asking teachers at the end of your junior year if you know what teachers you want to ask, and you can use the same phrasing as above. That way, they have the entire summer to think about it and maybe even start writing your letter. And teachers, they have to write a lot of recs. So once again, you want to ask as soon as possible. When it comes to the content of the letter, it's mostly out of your control because you can't write it, but you definitely can influence what goes in the letter. And don't be afraid to ask your teachers for anything or to write about something specific because they are fully here to support you. And during your application process, they want to see you thrive and they want to see you go to your dream school. So I have 2 pieces of advice for this part. Number 1, you want to prepare materials. That can be like a resume or an activity sheet, because sometimes teachers will ask you to supplement stuff so that they have something to write about, or they can know a little bit more about you before they start writing. So some teachers ask you to fill out a form about yourself, others ask for resumes, activity sheets. So you want to be able to have this material ready before they ask so that you can send it as soon as possible. The second piece of advice I have is to get teachers to write about different aspects of you. Once again, you don't want teachers to repeat the same thing over and over again, especially if you're submitting 2, 3, or 4 recs. So teachers usually do this, but before they start writing, they'll ask you, is there one aspect of you that you want me to focus on? Therefore, try to mention 3 or 4 different aspects, one for each teacher, so they can write about different things. You can also hint at certain anecdotes that you want them to write about to make it even more personal. Like, "Hey, Miss Smith, remember that one time in class when and then say what you kind of want them to write about, and maybe they'll get the idea and write about that one specific anecdote. My last slide is for underclassmen. So if you are not a senior and you're just kind of here hanging out, learning about the application process and teacher recs, I do have advice for you as well. The first being, you want to build good relationships with both your teachers and your classmates. And for the second part, the first part's kind of obvious. You want to have a good relationship with your teacher if you're writing, if you're going to ask them for a rec, but you also want to have good relationships with your classmates because your teachers do watch how you interact with other people. So you want to be a good person in general and just be friendly, be nice. The second piece of advice I have is to be an active participant in class because it shows the teacher that you're there to learn, you're there to do well, and you're not just there to get the grade. Kind of feeds into the third piece of advice, which is you want to show genuine interest in the subject, especially if it's something that you will be majoring in, because you want to show that, once again, you're there because you're interested, not just because you want to get the letter grade. And my fourth piece of advice is kind of like how to do that. So you can stay after class to converse with your teacher. Like I used to do that with my competitive civics teacher. I would stay after class and talk politics with her. You could attend office hours, which is especially popular this year with online school. You can go in during lunch to ask questions or to do test corrections and just constantly ask questions, whether it be after class, during lunch, or over email, especially when you're confused. For underclassmen, in your senior year, if you do have an extra class or time, you can TA for a teacher that you do want to write, a teacher that you want you're going to ask the rec for, because especially if you had them in your sophomore or junior year, TAing for them in your senior year, you're kind of popping in again saying, hey, I'm still here. And it's reminding your teacher who you are, and you can probably help them out a bit to kind of develop that relationship even further for the letter recommendation. So yeah, that's it for letters of rec. I'm now going to pass it over to Ryan. And unfortunately, once again, he isn't with us in person or remotely today, but we do have a video of him, and he's going to be covering interviews.
Hey everyone, my name is Ryan and I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'll be attending Brown University in the fall, and today I'll talk to you guys about college interviews. Yes, I said that right, college interviews. If you're freaking out right now, don't worry. At this point in the process when I was applying, I didn't even know that interviews were a part of the application. So just know that you're getting a head start and you're learning about this early. Before I get into the workshop, here's a roadmap of what to expect for the rest of my presentation. It's divided into 5 parts: why the interview, before the interview day and common interview questions, what to ask your interviewer, because they will open it up to you to ask questions, and finally, the 5th part, after the interview. I also want to emphasize that not all schools have an interview component like the UC schools, but if you're applying to schools like the Ivies and many other private universities, there is an interview process. So the interview is an important part of your holistic application, yet it's often overlooked by applicants. First, it gives a more personal aspect to your application. It also gives you the opportunity to mention something that wasn't on your application, like recent achievements. And it even gives you the opportunity to elaborate more on something that was on your application, maybe an extracurricular that you're really passionate about. Before I get to the interview itself, here are some reminders. Interviews may seem nerve-wracking as a high school student. Trust me, I know. But just know that most interviewers are alumni of the school who volunteered to do this. They're excited to meet you, learn about you, and hopefully advocate for you in the admissions process. If the college you're applying to offers an interview, it's most likely optional, but never turn down an interview. Next, they use the same email you provide on the application. So use one with an appropriate address and one that you check often. Also keep in mind that they'll see your profile picture, so make sure it's appropriate. For most schools, your interviewer will reach out to you via email, so it's important to respond promptly, use proper email formatting, and address them as Mr. or Mrs. or Mr. or Miss. And one last thing, make sure to check your school's admissions page for more info. I know that for some schools like Claremont McKenna, you need to reach out to request an interview. And like I said before, your school might not even have an interview process to begin with. Okay, so you made it to the day of the interview. Make sure to show up early and wear something appropriate. Don't come in a t-shirt and shorts, but a suit and tie is probably overdoing it unless your college admissions page says otherwise. I always stuck to a solid polo or button-down shirt. And since mine were over Zoom, I had pajama pants on. But khakis or chinos are probably more fitting for an in-person interview. So you should go for like a business casual outfit, and this goes for all genders. While college interviews are ultimately just a conversation, I do recommend practicing your answer to tell me about yourself. I've gotten this question in almost all of my interviews. How you answer this is really just up to you, but I would keep it concise, and I wouldn't use this as an opportunity to read off my resume. It is a good opportunity, however, to show how you'd be a great fit for the school you're applying to. And it also is a great opportunity to introduce an activity, interest, or accomplishment that you would love to elaborate on. As I mentioned earlier, how you answer this question is entirely up to you. But if you are looking for some way to structure your response, I think this is a good way to do it. So first, you want to talk about your past. So share an element of your upbringing that made you the student, leader, or person you are today. And make sure to demonstrate how it relates to who you are now. For me, I'd say something like this. Oh, can you go back a little bit? Okay, so I would say, I grew up in Alhambra, California, and I come from a Chinese immigrant family. I'll be a first-generation college student, and I'm excited to not only have the opportunity to attend college, but also have the freedom to pursue a path meaningful to me. Then you should share about the present. So discuss who you are and what you are involved in now. Share recent accomplishments, relevant activities, interests, or even short-term goals you're focused on at the moment. Again, here's my example. Since I'm from the LA area, I'm a diehard Laker fan. I've played basketball for a long time now on my high school varsity and travel club teams. At school, I'm the president of our Future Business Leaders of America chapter. And one of the more meaningful things I've done outside of school was create a Black-owned business directory with my sister to help Hulu and Disney's direct-to-consumer and international branch support Black-owned businesses on Juneteenth. And finally, you want to end by talking about your future. So you should showcase your potential. What hopes and dreams keep you moving forward? Show what you can bring to the college and how you plan to be an involved member of the student body. Here's what I'd say. As I look to the near future, I plan to major in economics, and I hope to become a social entrepreneur further down the line. And I know I broke my response down into 3 parts, but your response to this interview question should obviously be one cohesive answer. Another common question that you should prepare for is, why do you want to attend blank university? Or why do you think you'd be a great fit for blank university? Again, there's no right way to answer these questions. I think that the response you believe most is the best one you can give. My advice, though, is not to approach these types of questions with a why me or why Dartmouth mindset. You should really try to explain why you're a great fit for the school and also why the school is a great fit for you. I will also say that instead of memorizing your answers to questions, you should remember things like anecdotes and important events in your life. So study yourself. Since it's a conversation, you don't want to sound robotic. Telling stories will not only make your answers more compelling, but it'll also help your interviewer connect with you. And scan that QR code over there. It has a link with some great questions that'll help you start reflecting on your experiences and possibly help in your essay writing process. So I'll give you a quick second for that. All right, so now we've made it to the end of the interview. Typically, your interviewer will open it up to you to ask questions. So make sure to prepare 2 to 3 great questions to ask. Don't waste their time by asking things you can find out online. I think this is a great opportunity to tap into their personal experiences at the college. You could ask a question like, what was your favorite and least favorite part about blank university? Another great question I think to ask, if you're confident enough, is, based on what you've learned about me, what is something that might hold back an admissions officer from accepting me to blank university? And let me take a shot at it. They probably won't have anything for you, but if you're lucky enough, it's a great opportunity to advocate for yourself. Not to mention, it shows that you're confident, assertive, and eager to attend the school. It's a great way to get your interviewer to remember you out of the many other candidates that they've spent time with. And this is also a personal preference, but I like to ask a question unrelated to the school. Chances are you have an extremely intelligent and successful person in front of you. It's a great opportunity to learn and also hear interesting stories. If you're interested in their career, any of their experiences, or you're dying to know something, just ask them. I've gotten really interesting responses to the question over there that says, knowing what you know now, what is something you'd tell your 17-year-old self? Okay, so you made it through the hard part. The interview is over now, but there's one more thing you should do. Send a thank you email. You should aim to send your email the next day because it gives them time to reflect on your interview, but it's also early enough to leave a good impression before they submit your report. Sending a thank you email is actually something that a lot of interviewees fail to do. And that's it. Good luck in your application process, and I hope this helped. If you have any other questions, I'd be glad to answer them or find someone who could. Since I'm not here live with you guys to answer any questions, my email is over there and my Instagram handle is also below it.